Assalamualaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So today we are going to study one more topic for this semester, which is the topic of cell signaling. Okay, but before that, let me share my screen first. Okay, so this is the topic for cell signaling. Okay, I hope all of you can see my slide. Okay, so let me start. So this is the overview of the cellular, okay, the cellular internet. So cellular is actually cell-to-cell communication. Okay, so this cell-to-cell communication is essentials for life of the unicellular and also multicellular organisms. Okay, and cells can communicate to the cells, okay, to other cells next to themselves, or cells from much further away in another part of the body. So how do cells receive a signal? Okay, so once cells receive a signal, and how does this lead to change inside the cells, or how does the cells give response to the signals that the cells are receive? Okay, so in the previous lecture, we already learned about the signal, right? So signal, we have chemical signal, we also have the electrical signal. Okay, and biologists have discovered some universal mechanisms of cellular regulations, and the combined effect of multiple signals determine the cell's response. For example, okay, we take the examples of dilations of the blood vessels. Okay, so these dilations of the blood vessels is actually controlled by the multiple molecules. Okay, so the evolutions of cellular signaling. The signal transduction pathway is a series of steps by which a signal on a cell surface is converted into a specific cellular response. Okay, you know we have several pathway of cell, right? We have the receptions, we have the transductions, and we have the response. So the signal transductions is a series which is the signal have been converted into specific response. Okay, so the signal transduction pathway convert signals on a cell surface into cellular response. So actually we are talking about the transductions. Okay, the transduction is actually an actions or the process of converting, okay, converting something, especially the energy, okay, or a message into another form. So in this is it change the converts the signal into response. Okay, so we go to the introduction of the cell communications. So cell signaling, which is cell to cell contact. For example, you contact through the cell junctions or through the cell recognitions. Okay, the signal also is actually between the secretions of local regulators or the neurotransmitters and neurons, and also like the hormones that traveling in the blood vessels. Okay, so this hormone traveling in the blood vessel is actually a long distance of cell signaling. So we have three stages of cell signaling. Okay, we already learned in previous lecture. Okay, the first one we have the reception. The second one we have the transductions, and the third one we have the cellular response. So for this topic, we are going to study in details about the each steps of the cell signaling. And please don't forget and please don't get confused with our previous topic, which is regarding the neurons, okay, and regarding the sensory systems. Okay, the neurons, we have the signal reception, signal integrations, signal conduction, and signal transmissions. While in the sensory, we have the RTTP, which is the reception, transductions, transmissions, and perceptions. And here in the sex signaling, we have the three: reception, transduction, and cellular response. Okay. So the reception is of a signal, which is the ligand and the receptor. Okay, received by the ligand and also receptor. So we have three receptors in the receptions pathway, which is we have the G protein couple receptor. We also have the receptor tyrosine kinesis, and the third receptor that we have in the cell signaling is the ion channel receptor. Okay, so the transductions, just now we're talking about the evolution in the cell signaling. Okay, it will happen in the transductions. So transduction is actually a multi-step pathway. So it have a phosphorylations by the kinesis, and also we have the second messenger. Okay, we have the first messenger, and we have the in the transduction pathway we have the second messengers. For example, we have the cyclic M, okay, or OCM, and also we have the calcium and IP3. IP3 is actually the inositol 1,4,5 triphosphate. Okay, here. And for the third pathway, which is the cellular response, it actually can be occur in the cytoplasmic or nuclear. Okay. So types of signaling, type of cell signaling. Okay, we have two types of cell signaling. We have either direct or indirect. So when the cell signal are indirect, which is the cells are transferred via the gap junctions. While when we're talking about the cell signaling indirect, it's actually the signaling cells release a chemical messenger that binds to a receptor on the target cells. Okay, and will activate a signal transduction pathway. Okay, signal transduction pathway, which is will convert the signal into a response. Right. So in this indirect cell signaling, we have the short distance. We also have the long distance. The short distance, such as the paracrine and also autocrine, which is the paracrine is diffuses to a nearby cell, diffuse. Okay, the short distance, and for the autocrine is diffuses back to the signaling cells. Okay, and for the long distance in the indirect cell signaling, which is the endocrine, okay, in the previous lecture, we already learned about the endocrine. This is actually the pathway of um, the pathway of the cell signaling, okay, which can be converted in a long distance. Okay, for example, we're talking about the hormone. So hormone is transported by a circulatory system. And also in the last distance, we have the neural, which is electrical signal, which is travels along a neuron and released as a neurotransmitter. Okay, so here we already learned in general in our previous lecture. So local and long distance signaling. Cells in a multicellular organisms communicate by chemical messenger, okay, in a multicellular organisms. So local, for example, factors, growth factors or neurotransmitter, okay, the chemical signal. And for the long distance is by using the hormones, okay. So animals and plant cells have a cell junctions that directly connect the cytoplasms of adjacent cells, okay. And in the local signaling, the animal cells may communicate by direct contact, which is cell-cell recognition. So this is the communication by direct contact between the cells. Okay, as you can see from here. So this is the gap junctions. So this is the plasma membrane. Okay, so actually the plasma membranes are connect, okay, within the adjacent cells, okay, through the gap junctions. Okay, so this is the plasmodesta between plant cells. So this is between animal cells. Okay, so this is the direct contact between cells, which is via the cell junction. So we also have the second types, which is cell-cell recognition. Okay, so cell-cell recognition is when the cells are recognized by other cells. Okay, they have the recognition cells here. So here the signal will be transferred. Okay, transfer out. So the gap junctions is actually a specialized protein complex that create a aqueous pore. Okay, aqueous pore between two adjacent cells. Okay, so hydrophilic, a chemical messenger can travel through a lipid membrane. Okay, and typically involve the movement of ion. Okay, in the gap junctions. So local cell communication in animal. Okay, so this is the local signaling. We have a paracrine signaling and synaptic signaling. Okay, so this is the in the secretory vesicle. Okay, in here they have a cells. Okay, so the secretory vesicle will release the cells. Okay, and the cells will diffuse through the extracellular fluid. So this is the extracellular fluid. So we release the cells through the to the extracellular fluid. Then it will diffuse through to the targeted cells. Okay, so this is we call as a paracrine signaling, diffuse through extracellular fluid. Okay, and this one is actually the neurotransmitter, still the diffuse, but it diffuse across the synapse. Okay, across the synaptic, or we call it synaptic cleft. Okay, so this is the uh, we call the electrical signal along nerve cell that trigger release to the neurotransmitter. Okay, presynaptic, and this is the postsynaptic. So the neurotransmitter are released from the presynaptic to the postsynaptic and diffuse across the synaptic cleft. Okay, so this is we call the local signaling. So the long distance, okay, we're talking about the hormones. So the endocrine cells, the endocrine cell will release the hormone. So the hormone will transfer and transport through the blood vessels. Okay, so the hormone travels in the blood vessel to the targeted cells. Okay, so this is the targeted cells. So this is the long distance signal transport. Okay, so we have the three stages of cell signaling. Okay, a preview. The first research into cell signaling involved how the hormone of epinephrine acts on the cells. Okay, the hormone of NE acts on the cells. So the research suggested that the cells receiving signal went through the three process. Okay, we already know about this one, which is the first one is the receptions. The second one is the transductions, where the signal are converted into the response. Okay, and the third one is the outcome, the response. Okay. So this is the overview of the cell signaling. Okay, just now we are talking about the three pathway, three step. Okay, the first one is the reception. Okay, where the signal molecule, okay, are attached to the receptor. Okay, so this is the plasma membrane, and this is the cytoplasms. Okay, then it will go to the transduction pathway, which is it's a relay molecules in the signal transduction pathway. Okay, it pass on the molecules in the signal transduction pathway. Right. So this is the transduction steps. Okay, second step, and the third one is response. So after the molecules have been relayed in the signal transduction pathway, then it will convert the signal into the response. So here is the activation of cellular response. So this is actually the overview of the cell signaling. Okay, so we go one by one. Okay, in the steps. Okay, of the cell signaling. Okay, the first one is the reception. So reception is a signal molecule bind to a receptor protein, and it causes it to change its shapes. Okay, so the binding between the signal molecule and ligand and the receptor is highly specific. Okay, the ligand, the molecules are specifically bind to a specific receptor. So a shape change in the receptor is often the initial transductions of a signal. Okay, and most signal receptor are plasma membrane proteins. Okay, so the receptor in the plasma membrane. So most water soluble signal molecules bind to a specific site on a receptor protein in the plasma membrane, and there are three main types of membrane receptor. Okay, in the reception process, okay, when the ligand, the molecules want bind with the receptor, so we have three main types of membrane receptor. The first one we have the G protein coupled receptor, and the second one we have the receptor tyrosine kinesis, and the third one we have the ion channel receptor. Okay, so we go to the first membrane plasma receptor, which is the G protein coupled receptor. So this G protein coupled receptor is a plasma membrane receptor that works with the help of G protein. Okay, that is why we call it as a G protein coupled receptor. Okay, it works with the G protein. So the G protein is acts as an on or off switch. Okay, which is if the GDP is bound with the G protein, so the G protein is inactive. Okay, let me see. Okay, so the GDP is actually we are talking about the guanosine diphosphate. Okay, so this is the membrane receptor, the G protein coupled receptor. So this is the signaling molecule bind site where the ligand or the molecules will bind to this receptor. Okay, so this is the segment that interacts with the G protein. Okay, so again, so this is the G protein coupled receptor. So this is the receptor, right? So if just now talking about if the GDP, the guanosine diphosphate, okay, the if is bound to the protein, okay, to the G protein, so the G protein will be inactive. Okay, so then the signal molecule will bind to the receptor, okay, and the G protein change into the GTP. Okay, so it will become the active G protein. Okay, then it will relay the molecules. Okay, relay the molecules to the activate to the inactivate enzyme. Then once it bind to the enzyme, it will become the activated enzymes. Okay, so then it will transduct or convert the signal into the cellular response. Okay, so we go to the second membrane receptor, which is we have the receptor tyrosine kinases. So this receptor tyrosine kinases are membrane receptor that attach phosphate to tyrosines. Okay, just now is we talking about the GDP and G protein, right? And G protein. Okay, the first one. So the second one is actually we're talking about the phosphate and tyrosine. Okay, so a receptor tyrosine kinase can trigger a multiple signal transduction pathway at once. Okay, so we see. So this is the tyrosine. Okay, so the receptor tyrosine kinase protein. Okay, so this is the alpha helix receptor. So this is the ligand binding set. So this is the molecule, the ligand, right? So once the signal molecule are attached, are bind to the receptor tyrosine kinase protein, okay, so it become the dimer. Okay, cantum become the dimer. So the dimer, so it will activate the tyrosine kinase region. Okay, so it will attach the ADP. Okay, it will activate, then it will attach the phosphate here to the tyrosine. Okay, it attached to the tyrosine. This is why we call the tyrosine receptor tyrosine kinesis. Okay, the phosphate are bind to the tyrosine, and then it will fully activate the receptor tyrosine kinesis. Okay, once the phosphate has been attached to the tyrosine, it will fully activate this receptor. Okay, so then it will activate the proteins and will relay the molecules the signal to the different process. So it will trigger multiple signal. Okay, so this is the first signal, so this is the second signal. So in this receptor tyrosine kinesis, it will trigger multiple signal transduction pathway at once. Okay, so this is the second membrane plasma receptor. We go to the third one, which is a ligand gated ion channel receptor. So this ion channel receptor acts as a gate when the receptor changes shape. Okay, it action as a gate. Okay, so when a signal molecule binds as a ligand to the receptor, so the gate will allow the specific ion, such as we have the sodium or the calcium ion, through a channel in the receptor. So the ion channel receptor actually act as a gate. Okay, so we see the process. So this is the closed gate. Okay, so this is the ligand, the molecule. So this is the ion channel receptor. Okay, so this is plasma membrane, this is the ion. So when the molecules are bind to the receptor, so the ion channel receptor will act as a gate, right? So just now it closed, so just now, so here it will open the gate. So it will let the ions to enter the cells. Okay, so then it will convert, transducts the ion to the cellular response. So then, when the signal molecules are detached back from the ion-gated channels, it will close back the gate. So the ion cannot enter the cells. Okay, so this is the third of memory receptor, which is ion channel receptor, which act as a gate. Okay, so just now we are talking about the first steps in the cell signaling, which is the receptions. So we move to the second pathway, second step, which is the transductions. Okay, the transductions, the cascades of molecule interaction relay signal. Okay, we relay, pass on the signal from the receptors to the target molecules in the cells. So the signal transduction usually involve multiple steps. Okay, so the multiple pathway can amplify, okay, a signal, which means a few molecules can produce a large cellular response. Okay, because the multiple pathway are amplifying the signal. Okay, so the multiple pathway provide more opportunities for coordinations and regulations of the cellular response. Okay, hold on, yeah. Okay, so we continue back. All right. So this is the transactions pathway, which is multiple pathway in the transactions. Okay. So we have two here, which is the first one we have the protein phosphorylations and the phosphorylations. Okay. So in many pathway, the signal is transmitted by a cascade of protein phosphorylation, and the protein kinesis transfer the phosphate, okay, from the ATP to protein, and we call it as a phosphorylations. Okay, so the process of phosphorylation where the protein kinesis transfer the phosphate from ATP to protein. Okay, so let me see the process. So this is the process of phosphorylation, okay, phosphorylation cascade. So when the molecule, a ligand, bind to the receptor, so it will activate a relay molecule, right? So this is the inactive protein kinase. So this is active protein kinase. So it will transfer the phosphate, okay, the protein kinase will transfer the phosphate from the ATP, okay. So it will become to the active protein kinase. So it will have the multiple step here, the same step here. So from the active protein kinase 1 to the active protein kinase 2 to the active protein kinase 3. Okay, just now we were talking about the protein kinase transfer phosphate from ATP to the protein. Okay, so it transfer the ATP, the phosphate from the ATP to the protein. So this is what we call as the phosphorylation cascade. Okay, where the protein kinase here uh, transfer the phosphate from ATP to protein. Okay, so this is the multiple pathway which is amplifying a signal. Okay, so it will amplify the signal. So a few molecules can produce a large cellular response. So this is what we call, the first one is the phosphorylation cascade. Okay, so next we have the small molecules and ions as a second messenger. So there is extracellular signal molecule that binds to the receptor is the pathway first messenger. So the first step, which is the molecules bind to the receptor, is actually the first messenger in the reception pathway, right? In the reception process. So let's talk about the second messenger. So the second messenger are small, spread throughout a cells by diffusion. Okay, so we have the common of the second messenger, which is the cyclic M or CM. Okay, or CM, and we have the calcium ion. So these two are the common second messengers. So the second messengers participate in the pathway initiated by the G protein, which is the protein couple receptor and receptor tyrosine kinase. Okay, they are actually initiated by these two membrane receptor, right? The G protein and also tyrosine kinase. So we go to the first one, the common second messenger. The first one is the cyclic M. So the cyclic M, the CM, is one of the most widely used second messengers. Okay, so the adenylyl cyclase, which is an enzyme in the plasma membrane, it converts the ATP to the CM. Okay, in response to an extracellular signal. And many signal molecules will trigger the formations of the CM. And other components of CM pathway are the G protein. CM is usually activates protein kinase A, which phosphorylates various other proteins. So this is how the processes look like. So this is the CM, so the cyclic M, as the second messenger in the G protein signaling pathway. Okay, so this is the first messenger. We are talking about the molecule or the ligand had been bind to the receptor. So this is the first messenger. Then it will activate the G protein. Okay, so then the enzyme convert the ATP, okay, to the CM. So this will bind to the enzyme. So this is the enzyme. So the enzyme will convert the ATP to the CM. So this is the second messenger. So the CM will usually activate the protein kinase A. Then it will give the response or convert the response into the cellular responses. Okay, so this is the second messenger, right? So we go to the second types of the common second messenger, which is the calcium ion, okay, and IP3, okay, inositol triphosphate. So the calcium ion acts as a second messenger in many pathways. So calcium is an important second messenger because the cells can regulate its concentration. Okay, so this is where the plasma membrane. Okay, so this is the nucleus. So here is the high concentrations calciums. So here is the low concentrations calciums. So you can see, so this is the maintenance of calcium ion concentrations in animal cells, okay, which is from the low concentrations, it goes to the high concentrations. Okay, from the low concentrations of calcium ion, it will go to the high concentrations calcium ion. So this is where the cells are regulates their concentrations. Okay, so second, the signal relayed by a signal transduction pathway may trigger an increase in calcium in the cytosol. So pathway leading to the release of calcium involve the IP3 as also the DAG, the deoxyribonucleotides, okay, or DAG, as additionals of second messenger. Okay, so let's we see here. So this is the calcium and IP3 in a signaling pathway. So this is the first, okay, the first messenger, which is the signal molecule bind to a receptor, which is here is the G protein couple receptor. Then it will active the G protein. Okay, so then the G protein, okay, will go to the phospholipase C, okay, which is it will the pathway, this pathway will leading to a release of the inositol triphosphate, the IP3. Okay, so this will leading to the release of the IP3 and also the DAG. Okay, so this is as the additional second messenger here, right? So this is the cytosol. Okay, so a signal will relay, then all the signal will relay by a signal transduction pathway and may trigger an increase in calcium ion in the cytosol. Okay, so here they will the calcium ion will enter to the cytosol. So it will increase the concentrations of the calcium ion in the cytosol. So this is where the calcium ion as a second messenger. Okay, so then it will lead to the various protein activate. Then it will convert into the cellular response. Okay. So we go to the third pathway of the cell signaling, which is the response. Okay, just now we were talking about the receptions and also transductions. So here is the last steps in the cell signaling, which is response. So cell signaling leads to regulations of transcriptions or cytoplasmic activities. Okay, so the cells respond to an extracellular signal is sometimes called as the output response. Ultimately, a signal transduction pathway leads to regulations of one or more cellular activities, and this response may occur either in the cytoplasms, okay, or may involve action in the nucleus. Okay, the response either can be occur in the cytoplasms or nucleus. And the signaling pathway can also affect the physical characteristics of the cells. For example, the cell shapes, the physical characteristics of the cell. Okay, so the nuclear and the cytoplasmic responses. Many signaling pathways regulate the synthesis of enzymes, okay, or other proteins, usually by turning genes on or off in the nucleus. Okay, and the final activate molecule may function as a transcription factor. Okay, the final activated molecule can be functioned as a transcription factor, and other pathways regulate the activity of enzyme. All right. So we see here, for example, we talked about the growth factor. So the molecule here is a growth factor. So it will bind to the receptor. Okay. So this is in the reception pathway, the reception process. So then it will relay the molecules. Okay. So this is the phosphorylation cascade, multiple step, multiple pathway in the transductions. Right. So the protein kinesis will transfer the phosphate, okay, from the ATP to the protein. So this is we call as the phosphorylation cascade here. They have a multiple pathway, multiple step. Okay. So then it will relay the molecules to the enzymes. Okay, so this is the active transcription factor, and it will become the active transcription factor. Okay, where the phosphate will attach to the uh, factor here. So it will give a response. Okay, so it will give the response in the nucleus. It will bind to the DNA in the nucleus. So it will transport, give a response in the terms of mRNA. So this is the enzyme RNA polymerase will convert the gene here, the gene in the DNA, into a primary transcript as a mRNA. Okay, so the mRNA is actually created during the process of transcriptions. Okay, where the enzyme RNA polymerase convert the gene here, okay, into a primary transcript of mRNA. So this is the nuclear responses to a signal, which is the activations of the specific gene by a growth factor. Okay, so this is where the signals are converted. Right. So we go to the signal amplifications. Okay, the enzyme cascade amplify the cell's response. Just now, we were talking about the phosphorylations. Okay, cascade. So this is the enzyme cascade. It will amplify the cell's response. So at each step, the number of activated products is much greater than the preceding step. So at each step, okay, the activated product will increase, okay, than the preceding step. Okay, let me see. So this is the reception, okay, where the binding of epinephrine, okay, uh, and epinephrine hormone, okay, to the G protein couple receptor. So this is one molecule, okay, one molecule bind to one receptor. So this is where we go to the transduction process, okay. So in this transduction process, we have the multiple pathway, multiple step pathway. Okay, so as you can see from here, from inactive G protein to the active G protein. So here is the 10 to the power of 2 molecules. Then it will go to the second step, okay, which is it will active the adenylyl crisis. Okay, then we go to the cyclic MPM and we will go to the active protein kinase. So at each step, as you can see, at each step, the number of activated product is much greater than the preceding step. Okay, from 2 to 4 to 5 to 6. Okay, to the last one is the 10 to the power of 6. Then in the response process, okay, the glycogen, okay, will convert to the glucose 1 phosphate with the 10 to the power of 8 molecule. Okay, so this is actually the enzyme cascade, which is amplify the cell's response. Okay, just now you're talking about the phosphorylation cascade, which is the multiple pathways cap, amplify a signal. So this is amplify the cell's response. Okay, so this is the cytoplasmic response to a signal, which is the stimulations of glycogen breakdown by the epinephrine hormone. Okay, so that's all for today's topic, which is we already learned in details about the cell signaling. And again, we have 3 steps of cell signaling, which is the first one we have reception, transduction. Okay, transduction is actually the multi-step pathway, and the last one is the response. We also call as the output response. Okay, okay. Thank you very much. See you guys in the next week. Okay, Assalamualaikum.